Her biggest enemy wasn't outside. It wasn't a stranger or a neighbor or a friend. It was someone who lived right under her roof. Imagine this: the people you trust most, the one you called family, turn around and become the reason for your deepest pain. This is the heart-wrenching story of Chiamaka, a woman whose own blood tried to destroy her life. But instead of breaking, she rose from the ashes, turned her pain into power, and became a symbol of courage. What happened to her will make you cry, but how she fought back will make you cheer. You won't believe how it all ends. Welcome to Olu Beauty African Folktales channel. Have you subscribed? If you haven't, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Share with your family and friends. Oh yeah, guys, grab your popcorn, sit jeje, and enjoy yourself. Chiamaka sat on the old wooden stool outside her late father's house. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and her hands shook as she held a folded letter. The early morning was quiet, only the sound of a rooster crowing in the distance. They said family will stand by you, she whispered to herself, her voice breaking, and she continued. But no one told me that family can be the ones to throw you into the fire and watch you burn. Hi! A single tear rolled down her cheek as she crushed the letter in her fist. Not too long ago, Chiamaka's life had been perfect. She lived with her husband, Obinna, in a beautiful house in Enugu. Their 5-year-old son, Tochukwu, was the light of their lives. Chiamaka's catering business was thriving, and every morning, Obinna teased her that one day she would own the biggest catering company in the state. Then everything changed. One rainy night, Obinna was driving home when a reckless trailer lost control and crashed into his car. The news shattered Chiamaka's world. She screamed and collapsed when she saw his lifeless body. Her once beautiful home became a house of mourning. When Obinna was buried in his village, Chiamaka clutched little Tochukwu, refusing to let him out of her sight. After the burial, Obinna's mother, Mama Obinna, called a family meeting. Chiamaka, Mama Obinna said, her voice calm but firm, you are still young. You can remarry. Leave Tochukwu with us so he can grow up in his father's house. That is our custom. Oh. Chiamaka's head shot up and she said, Mama, with all due respect, Tochukwu is my son. Wherever I go, he goes. Mama Obinna didn't like that answer. She exchanged a long look with her younger son, Ifeanyi. From that day, the atmosphere changed. Ifeanyi began visiting Chiamaka often. He brought food and money and told her he just wanted to help. At first, Chiamaka was grateful. She was struggling to keep her business afloat and care for her son at the same time. But one morning, Chiamaka arrived at her catering shop only to find it locked with a big padlock. A court notice was pasted on the door, claiming that the shop no longer belonged to her, that Obinna had willed it to his brother, Ifeanyi. Chiamaka's legs almost gave way. That's impossible. Obinna never told me anything about a will. She ran home and waited for Ifeanyi to come. When he arrived that evening, he sat down confidently and poured himself a drink. I can make all these problems go away, he said, staring at her. Marry me, Chiamaka, is the only way to secure your son's future, or if not. Chiamaka's heart pounded and she said, Ifeanyi, are you out of your mind? You are my husband's brother. Ifeanyi smirked and said, and so what? Obinna is gone. You need a man to protect you and your son. If you don't accept my offer, I will make sure you and Tochku have nothing. Chiamaka's eyes filled with tears as she slapped him across the face. Get out of my house, idiot, she said. From that day, things became worse. Mama Obinna turned against her completely. She called the elders and accused Chiamaka of disrespecting their tradition. The elders warned Chiamaka that if she continued to fight the family, they might take Tochku away from her. That night, Chiamaka could not sleep. She packed a small bag, carried her sleeping son on her back, and fled the compound in the middle of the night under heavy rain. She boarded a bus and went to her late father's old house in the village. The house was dusty and abandoned, but it was all she had left. The next morning, she began cleaning. To survive, she set up a small table outside and started selling fruits by the roadside. It was a hard life, but she refused to give up. One afternoon, while sitting outside, an elderly man walked up to her. It was Mr. Carlo, her late father's friend. When he heard Chiamaka's story, he shook his head sadly and said, My dear, he said gently, that will they are using is fake. I knew Obinna well. He will never do such a thing without mentioning you. Let me help you fight this battle, he told her. For the first time in weeks, Chiamaka felt a little hope. But just when Mr. Carlo discovered the proof that the will was forged, disaster struck. That night, someone broke into his house, attacked him, and stole the documents. Chiamaka rushed to see him the next morning. They don't want you to find the truth, Mr. Carlo said weakly. But you must not give up, okay? Chiamaka went home that evening, her heart heavy. As she was putting Tochku to bed, she heard a knock on the door. She opened it and froze. Standing there was a young woman carrying a little girl about Tochku's age. My name is Ifoma, the woman said softly. This is my daughter. Obinna was her father too, she said. The lantern in Chiamaka's hand dropped to the floor. Her whole body trembled. Chiamaka stood frozen by the doorway. Her heart raced as she stared at the little girl in Ifoma's arms. The child looked so much like Tochukwu that it made Chiamaka's stomach twist. My husband? Chiamaka finally whispered, her voice trembling, and she continued. So Obinna was your child's father? Ifeoma nodded, tears filling her eyes, and she said, I didn't come to fight you, Chiamaka. I only came because Ifeanyi found me and threatened me to keep quiet. He said, if I ever told you about my daughter, he will ruin my life. Chiamaka felt her knees weaken. She grabbed the door frame to steady herself and she said, Why are you here now? Chiamaka asked, her voice low but sharp. Ifeoma looked down at her child and said, Because Ifeanyi came to my house yesterday and tried to take my daughter away. He said Obinna's property also belongs to my child and that if I don't cooperate with him, he will make sure I regret ever having this baby. Please, I need your help. I don't know what to do. Chiamaka was silent for a long time. A storm was raging inside her chest. Part of her wanted to slam the door and chase Ifeoma away, but another part of her knew this was bigger than just betrayal. This was about justice for her son and maybe for this innocent little girl too. Come inside, Chiamaka finally said. We need to talk. Ifeoma sat down and told her everything, how she met Obinna before he married Chiamaka, how they had a brief relationship, and how she found out she was pregnant after he had already married Chiamaka. She chose to stay quiet to avoid breaking Chiamaka's marriage. Chiamaka listened in silence, her tears falling quietly. When Ifeoma was done, Chiamaka stood up and faced the window and said, So Ifeanyi knew about your child all this while, and he still wants to take everything from me? Yes, Ifeoma whispered and said, and now I'm scared for my life. That man is very dangerous. Chiamaka wiped her tears and then said, then we will fight him together. The next day, Chiamaka returned to Mr. Kanu with Ifeoma and her daughter. When Mr. Kalu saw the girl, he was stunned. This changes everything, he said. If we can prove this child is Obinna's, it will destroy Ifani's case completely, he said. But Ifani was one step ahead. That same night, Chiamaka received a threatening letter pinned to her door, and it read, leave this village before it is too late for you. Next time, it will not be Mr. Kano's house they will attack. It will be yours. Chiamaka's hands shook as she read it. She looked at Ifeoma and Tochukwu sleeping peacefully on the mat and felt fear grip her heart. But instead of running, Chiamaka grew more determined. 2 days later, a group of thugs stormed Chiamaka's small fruit stand. They overturned her table, scattered her goods, and warned her loudly in front of the villagers, saying, if you value your life, leave this place and stop digging into matters that don't concern you. Okay? The villagers began whispering. Some told Chiamaka to obey and leave before she brought more trouble to the community. But one old woman, Mama Nkechi, stood by her and told her and said, my daughter, do not give up. Mama Nkechi said, evil will never triumph forever. Okay? Later that evening, Mr. Kalu called Chiamaka and said, good news, he said. Before the thief stole my files, I made a photocopy of one important paper. It's hidden in a place only I knew. If we can retrieve it, we can reopen the case. Chiamaka's heart leaped with hope. She and Ifeoma agreed to go with Mr. Kanu the next morning to fetch the document. But someone was watching them. That night, Ifeanyi sat in Mama Obinna's sitting room, his face dark with rage, and he said, that woman is becoming stubborn, he hissed. If she gets hold of that paper, we are finished, he told his mother. Mama Obinna leaned back and nodded slowly and said, then make sure she never sees it. Do whatever you must do, Ifeanyi. This family must not be disgraced. You heard me? Ifeanyi's lips curled into a cruel smile. Then next morning, as Chiamaka, Ifeoma and Mr. Kalu prepared to go retrieve the documents, a strange car stopped in front of the house. A man stepped out, dressed in a dark suit, and he said, are you Chiamaka? The man asked. Yes, Chiamaka replied cautiously. The man handed her a brown envelope and said, someone paid me to deliver this to you. Before she could ask any questions, the man got back into the car and drove away. Chiamaka opened the envelope and gasped. Inside were pictures of Ifeoma and her daughter tied up in a dark room. On the back of the photos was a note, and it read, if you want to see them alive, come alone tonight at 8 p.m. Do not tell anyone. If you do, you will find their bodies in the river by morning. The paper slipped from Chiamaka's hand. No, 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 this can't be happening, she whispered. She looked at Tochukwu playing in the corner, then at the clock on the wall. It was already past 6 p.m. Her heart pounded as she realized she had to make a decision. Tell Mr. Kalu and risk Ifeoma's life, or go alone and face whatever trap Ifeanyi has set for her. Chiamaka paced the room, her mind spinning. She looked again at the photographs, Ifeoma and her daughter, bound and terrified. Her heart raced, but then her fear slowly turned to anger, and she said, no, she whispered fiercely. I will not let Ifeanyi destroy another life. She quickly tucked Tochukwu into bed, kissed him on the forehead, and went outside. The moon was bright, and the village was quiet. Instead of telling Mr. Carlo, Chiamaka grabbed a small torchlight and a long stick for protection. She walked alone through the narrow bush path that led out of the village, following the instructions in the note. Her steps were heavy, but her spirit was burning with determination. By the time Chiamaka reached the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the village, it was almost 8 p.m. Her hands were shaking, but she pushed the rusty door open. Inside, the room was dark except for a dim lantern hanging from a hook. Chiamaka, a voice said from the shadows. Ifeanyi stepped forward, clapping slowly, a cruel smile on his face. Behind him, two thugs stood guard, and in the corner, Ifeoma and her daughter were tied to chairs, their mouths gagged. You should have listened to me the first time, Ifeanyi said, circling Chiamaka like a predator. Now you have pushed me to do this, he said. Chiamaka clenched her fist and said, Let me go, Ifeanyi. This is between you and me. Let these people go. Ifeanyi laughed bitterly and said, You think you are brave because you ran away with your son? You think you can challenge me? Everything Obinna left behind belongs to me, and now so do you. Do you hear me? Obinna said. He grabbed her arm roughly, but Chiamaka shoved him back with all her strength and said, You are a disgrace to your brother's memory, she shouted. His face darkened and he said, Tie her up. He backed at the thugs. Just as the thugs moved toward Chiamaka, the door of the warehouse burst open. Freeze! It was Mr. Carlo, followed by two policemen holding rifles. For a moment, everyone froze. Then one of the thugs tried to run, but a policeman fired a warning shot into the air. Ifeanyi's face turned pale and he shouted and said, How? How did you? Chiamaka stared at him with defiance and said, Did you really think I will come here without a plan? Earlier that evening, before leaving the house, Chiamaka had secretly sent a message to Mr. Carlo sharing her location and the time of the meeting. The policemen quickly united Ifeoma and her daughter. You are under arrest, one officer said, grabbing Ifeanyi by the collar. But Ifeanyi suddenly launched pushed the officer away and ran out of the warehouse into the dark bush path. The policemen gave chase, but Ifeanyi disappeared into the night. Chiamaka, Ifeoma, and the children were escorted back to the village safely. This is not over, Mr. Kalu said grimly. As long as Ifeanyi is out there, you and the children are not safe, he said. Chiamaka nodded, but deep inside, she was no longer the same frightened woman. Something has changed in her that night. She had faced her greatest fear and survived. The next morning, Mama Obinna stormed into the compound, furious, and she said, You have brought shame to this family, she shouted. You called the police on my son? You, she said. Chiamaka stood her ground and said, Your son tried to kidnap and kill us. If you love him, tell him to surrender before things get worse. Mama Obinna's face twisted with rage and she shouted and said, You will regret this, Chiamaka. Mark my words, you will regret it. She turned and left, her wrapper swaying angrily. Later that week, Mr. Kalu called Chiamaka to his house and he said, I have something for you, he said, handing her a dusty envelope. This was hidden in your father's old safe. It is a letter from Obinna, written just a week before his death. Chiamaka's hands trembled as she opened it. The letter read, My dearest Chiamaka, if anything ever happens to me, know that everything I worked for belongs to you and to Chukwu. Do not let anyone take it from you. Ifeanyi cannot be trusted. I recently discovered things about him that I cannot explain in this letter. Protect yourself and our son at all cost. Tears filled Chiamaka's eyes as she clutched the letter to her chest and she said, I knew it, she whispered. I knew Obinna would never betray us. I knew it. But before she could rejoice, a young boy came running into the compound, panting heavily, and said, Auntie Chiamaka, he cried. They said Ifan has been seen near the river and he has sworn to burn your father's house tonight. Oh, please, Auntie, run away from this house, he said. Chiamaka's blood ran cold. She grabbed Tochku and Ifeoma's daughter, pushing them toward the back room. This war is not over, she said under her breath. But this time, I am ready, she told herself. The moon was high in the sky that night, casting a pale glow over the village. Chiamaka couldn't sleep. She kept pacing, clutching Obina's letter in one hand and her son's small toy car in the other. God, protect us, she whispered. Suddenly, the smell of smoke filled the air. Then came a scream. Fire! Fire! Someone shouted outside. Chiamaka ran to the window. Flames were rising from the far end of her father's compound. Chiamaka grabbed Tochukwu and rushed outside. Villagers were already pouring water and sand on the fire, trying to stop it from spreading. It's Ifani, someone cried. He was seen running away. Chiamaka's heart pounded. She turned and saw a dark figure standing near the palm trees, watching the fire with a twisted smile. Ifani. He locked eyes with Chiamaka, raised a bottle of petrol, threatening, then disappeared into the darkness. This is war, Chiamaka muttered, her hands shaking with rage. The next morning, Chiamaka stormed to Mama Obinna's house and was shouted and said, You wanted to see your son's true colors? Look outside. He tried to burn us alive. Mama Obinna was silent for a long moment, then sighed deeply and said, You think I don't know? She said finally, her voice trembling. You think I haven't seen what he has become? But Chiamaka, I am the reason he turned this way. Chiamaka frowned. What do you mean? She said. Mama Obinna sank onto a stool, tears filling her eyes, and she said, I lied to him. Years ago, I told Ifani that Obinna was not his father's real son, that you and your son had no right to the inheritance. I wanted him to fight for what I thought was his birthright, but the truth is, Ifani is the one who is not legitimate. His father had him with another woman. Obinna is the rightful heir. Everything belongs to you. What? Chiamaka gasped, stepping back in shock. You caused all this? Chiamaka said. Mama Obinna nodded, crying and said, I only wanted my son to have a share of the wealth, but my lie poisoned his heart. Now I don't know how to stop him. That night, Chiamaka sat with Mr. Kanu, clutching the letter and replaying Mama Obinna's confession in her mind. We have to act fast, Mr. Kalu said. Ifan is desperate. A man like that will stop at nothing. You and the children must leave the village for now, he told her. Chiamaka shook her head and said, No, if I run, he wins. This is my home. I will face him, but on my own terms. What do you have in mind? Mr. Carlo asked. Chiamaka's lip curled into a determined smile. I will lure him out, she said. Once and for all, we end this. So the next evening, Chiamaka sent word through a trusted villager that she would be alone at the family house with a box of documents proving her right to the inheritance. She knew the news would get to Ifani. As night fell, she hid Tochukwu and Ifeoma's daughter with Mr. Carlos' wife and sat quietly in the living room, a lantern by her side. Her heart was racing, but her eyes were fierce. Minutes later, she heard footsteps. The door creaked open. Ifani stepped in, a dagger in his hand, sweat glistening on his forehead. This ends tonight, he growled. Yes, Chiamaka said calmly, standing up. It ends tonight, but not the way you think. Before Ifani could move, police officers emerged from the shadows of the house. Mr. Kalu stepped forward, holding a torch. It's over, Ifani. It's over, he said. Ifani roared in anger and tried to run, but Chiamaka blocked the door. You burned my father's house. You tried to take my son, and you betrayed the brother who loved you, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Look at what you have become. For a brief moment, Ifani's face softened, but then rage took over. He charged toward Shamaka with the dagger, and that's when a gunshot rang out. Bam! Ifani fell on the floor, clutching his leg, groaning in pain. The police quickly disarmed and handcuffed him. You will pay for everything, Chiamaka said, tears streaming down her face. As they dragged him away, Ifani turned and shouted and said, This is not the end. Chiamaka, you think you've won, but you have no idea who you are really fighting with. Then he was gone. Later that night, Chiamaka found an envelope tucked under the chair where Ifeanyi had stood. Inside was a single piece of paper with strange writing, and it read, It was not an accident. Obinna was silenced. Chiamaka's hands went cold. What does this mean? She whispered. Mr. Kalu looked worried. It means there is someone bigger behind all this. Ifeanyi may just be a pawn. Chiamaka's eyes widened. Then the real battle has just begun. The night after Ifeanyi's arrest was quiet, but Chiamaka could not sleep. The words on that mysterious note kept echoing in her head. It was not an accident. Obinna was silenced. She sat on the veranda, the cool night breeze brushing against her face. Obinna's letter clutched to her chest, and she said, I will find the truth, she whispered to the stars, for you, for our son, and for our love. Early the next morning, Chiamaka visited the police station to see Ifeanyi. He was sitting behind bars, looking pale but still defiant. You think you are smart, Chiamaka, he said with a bitter laugh. You think you have won? Chiamaka took a deep breath and said, Tell me the truth, Ifeanyi. Who killed Obinna? Ifeanyi's expression changed. His eyes darted around nervously. You don't want to know, he said finally, because when you find out, you will wish you never asked. Before she could press him further, the police officer on duty told her the visiting time was over. But as she turned to leave, Ifeanyi whispered and said, Ask Mama Obinna about the night Obinna died. Ask her where she was. Chiamaka froze. That evening, Chiamaka went to Mama Obinna's house. Mama, she said, her voice steady, I want to know the truth about the night Obinna died. Mama Obinna's eyes widened. What kind of question is that? Mama, please, Chiamaka pleaded. Did you see him that night? Was he with anyone? Mama Obinna looked away, tears filling her eyes, and she said, Your husband came to see me that night, she said softly. He told me he had discovered something terrible about a business partner in Lagos, something that could destroy the whole family if it came out. He said he was going to confront the man the next day. She wiped her eyes with the edge of her wrapper and then continued. But he never made it to that meeting. The next morning, they told us his car had crashed on the express road. But Chiamaka, she paused, lowering her voice and said, I always believed someone tampered with that car. Chiamaka's breath caught in her throat. Who was this business partner, Mama? She asked. Mama Obinna hesitated, then whispered a name, Chief Okafor. Chief Okafor was one of the most powerful businessmen in the state, a man known for his political connections and ruthless ways. Chiamaka's hands trembled. So Obinna's death might have been planned? Yes, Mama Obinna said, nodding sadly. But Chiamaka, this is dangerous. Men like Chief Okafor do not forgive. If you go after him, you might not survive. Oh. Chiamaka stood tall, determination burning in her eyes, and she said, Mama, I cannot let fear rule me anymore. If he killed my husband, I will not rest until the world knows. That night, a strange thing happened. Chiamaka woke up to find a small black envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with four words written in red ink. It said, "Stop digging or die." Her heart pounded as she looked around, but the compound was silent. Chiamaka clutched the paper tightly and said, "They want to scare me," she whispered, "but I will not stop." The next day, she visited Ifoma, who had just recovered from her ordeal. "Ifoma, I need your help," Chiamaka said. "You worked with Obinna in the company before. Do you have any documents about his business dealings with Chief Okafor?" Ifeoma nodded and said, "Yes, I kept copies of some contracts. There was something strange about the last deal Obinna signed before his death. He told me not to trust Chief Okafor," she told her. Together, they searched through Ifeoma's old files until they found a folder marked confidential. Inside were papers showing huge sums of money missing from the company's accounts and Chief Okafor's signature on most of them. "This is it," Chiamaka whispered. "This is why Obinna died." Oh! But before they could celebrate, a loud knock came at the door. "Who is there?" Ifeoma asked nervously. No answer. The knock came again, harder this time. Chiamaka quickly grabbed the folder and bind it under her wrapper. When they opened the door, two tall men in dark suits were standing outside. "Madam Chiamaka," one of them said coldly, "our oga wants to see you tonight." "Who is your oga?" Chiamaka asked, though she already knew the answer. "Chief Okafor," the man said. "He does not like people asking too many questions." Chiamaka's heart skipped a beat, but she straightened her back. "Tell him I will come," she said. Ifeoma grabbed her arm and said, "Chiamaka, no, this is a trap." Oh. Chiamaka nodded. "I know, but if I don't face him now, he will keep coming after us." Night fell quickly. The air was heavy, as if the entire village could sense danger was near. Chiamaka wrapped her wrapper tightly around her waist and tied her headscarf with steady hands. Ifeoma tried to stop her and she said, "Chiamaka, this man is dangerous. Oh. Please don't go." Chiamaka touched her friend's shoulder and said, "If I don't face him now, he will keep coming after us. Pray for me, Joe." She walked out into the darkness where the two men in suits were waiting beside a black SUV. "Enter," one of them said. Chiamaka climbed into the car, clutching the hidden folder under her wrapper. After a long, tense drive, they arrived at Chief Okafor's mansion, a large compound with bright security lights and armed guards standing at the gate. As Chiamaka stepped out, her heart pounded, but her face remained calm. Inside, Chief Okafor sat in a massive chair, dressed in a white abada, gold rings glittering under the chandelier light. His presence was intimidating, but Chiamaka refused to look away. So Chief Okafor said softly, his deep voice echoing in the room, "You are the widow who thinks she can bring me down?" Chiamaka stood tall. "I only want the truth about my husband's death. That's all," Chiamaka said. Chief Okafor laughed a cold, chilling laugh and said, "Truth? Your husband was a foolish man. He discovered things he shouldn't have discovered. I gave him a chance to stay quiet, but he refused. And now you two want to follow his path?" Chiamaka's breath caught. "So you admitted you killed him?" Chiamaka said. Chief Okafor's eyes narrowed. "Careful, woman, careful. The walls have ears, and not everyone who comes here goes back home alive. You understand that?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper, and he said, "Obinna was going to expose me and a few others in high places. If he had succeeded, everything we built would have collapsed. I could not allow that." Chiamaka's hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. "You killed him for money?" Chiamaka asked. For survival, Chief Okafor backed, slamming his hand on the table. You don't know the world of power. Madam Chiamaka, people like me make decisions that feed families and run this country. Your husband was too soft hearted for this game. You understand that? Tears filled Chiamaka's eyes, but she stood her ground. Then I will finish what he started. The world will know what you did, she told him. Chief Okafor smiled darkly and said, You are brave. I like that. But be warned, if you continue, you will not live to see your son grow. He signaled to his guards, Take her home. Let her think carefully about her next move. As they drove back, Chiamaka silently slid the confidential folder deeper under her wrapper. She now had enough to prove Chief Okafor's corruption, but she knew he would come for her soon. When she got home, she fell to her knees, shaking. God, give me strength, she prayed. Ifeoma ran to her side and said, What happened? What happened, Chiamaka? Chiamaka wiped her tears and told her everything and said, We must act fast, she said. We cannot keep this evidence here. If they search this house, we are finished. Ifeoma nodded and said, I know someone in the city, a journalist who exposes corrupt leaders. We can trust him. Before they could make plans, a loud bang shook the compound. Boom! A bottle of petrol had been thrown over the fence, setting a small part of the compound on fire. They are here, oh, they are here, Ifeoma screamed. Chiamaka grabbed Tochukwu and the folder. We must run, she said. As they dashed out through the back gate, they saw two masked men approaching from the front with matches. Heart pounding, Chiamaka held her son close and ran into the dark bush path. Behind her, the sound of footsteps grew louder. The men were chasing them. Chiamaka tripped and fell, clutching Tochukwu to her chest. One of the men reached them, raising his machete. Bam! A gunshot rang out. The man dropped his weapon and ran. It was Mr. Kalu standing with his old hunting rifle. Quickly, he shouted, Come with me, come with me. They followed him to a small hut far from the village. You can't stay here anymore, Mr. Kalu said, breathing heavily. Take the child and go to the city tonight. These people are serious. They will not stop until you are gone. Please save your life and the life of this child. Chiamaka's hands shook as she held the folder tightly. I will go, she said, but I will not hide forever. I will return, and when I do, they will answer for Obina's death.